Not constitute legal advice and do not create an attorney-client relationship. For legal advice, you can call the office anytime at 1-800-DeWitt-LAW, or you can also interact with the show by sending us an email to askask@dewittlaw.com, or you can also call and leave a voicemail at 407-53-MOSES. Every Sunday morning right here at 10 a.m., you'll learn how Florida's legal issues affect you with your host, Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Mo will answer your questions to discuss the latest legal issues affecting the citizens of Central Florida. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt. And Mo, here we are, a new year, and maybe some positive news as far as homeowners insurance goes. There are a lot of people out there that are frustrated and cannot afford to pay their homeowners insurance bill.
I thought you were going to say a new year, a new you.
Well, no, I started that. That lasted about 4 days.
Well, at least you came to the reality quickly.
Yes, back to the old me.
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of left off last year talking about homeowners insurance and the special legislative session that was going on up in Tallahassee. And, you know, as we kind of ended the year, they did pass some homeowners insurance reform laws that go into effect, or went into effect rather, on the first of the year. So the big thing about that is it's going to limit the consumer's ability to sue the insurance company. And as we've kind of talked about before, it's kind of always a balancing act, right? It's kind of a pendulum. So, you know, now obviously the consumer is limited in their remedies if the insurance company does not pay them proper compensation for their claim. Theoretically speaking, that hopefully the intent is that insurance companies will start coming back to the state of Florida and that we'll see premiums decrease. Now, you know, as we've talked about before, there's nothing in this legislation that guarantees that premiums will be reduced, but they're taking actions to try to reduce litigation. So, you know, number one, the big thing is you used to be able to get your attorney's fees if you had to sue the insurance company. So,
right.
You know, if you had you know, $10,000 in damage to your home, insurance company said we're not paying it, you could sue them and not only get the $10,000, but you could also get the money you had to pay for your attorney. Well, they eliminated that now. So now if they don't pay the claim, you just get the $10,000. So it could cost you $10,000 to hire an attorney. And yeah, you win the case, but you're still at a net zero.
So you're at a wash.
You're at a wash. So, you know, obviously that's going to limit people wanting to bring litigation, because you have to do a cost benefit analysis to see, is it worth it? And so basically just increase that dollar threshold to see, is it worth bringing claims against the insurance company? So that's what probably the biggest change in this legislation that we're going to see. Obviously, you know, consumer protection advocates are saying it's going to be horrible for consumers. Insurance companies are claiming, oh, all the litigation was frivolous, which in my experience is not the case, but we'll see where it goes. You know, like I said before, I think it's oftentimes a pendulum effect. Maybe it's swung a little too far towards the consumers, where some consumers were taking advantage of it, and now it's going to swing back towards the insurance companies. Then we'll see a swing at some point in the future, most likely.
I do think that it did swing, you know, as a consumer, you know, and a person that was paying a pretty high premium for the insurance. I think it did swing towards our way, because, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people would knock on my door going, I can get you a roof, whether you just let me up there, let me take a look. And friends that got roofs, you know, it's like, wait, did you even have a storm?
Right. Well, you know, the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You pay for it now or you pay for it later.
Sure.
So there's no such thing as a free roof. You pay for it now, you pay for it later.
Yeah.
We're all paying for it later, basically. That's what caused all these rates to go up. And yeah, there was a whole industry really created of these free roofing claims. They're giving out free roofs essentially. That really, at least as far as I remember, didn't exist, you know, 10, 20 years ago in the state.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The pendulum probably did swing too far in one side's favor. You know, unfortunately, the people who are going to be hurt by this are the people who have legitimate claims who can't get their home fixed.
Right.
I know there was one person who I have some mutual friends with and friendly with in town here, who their home was hit by a tornado a while back, and they actually went up to Tallahassee to speak against this legislation because they had a lot of trouble with their insurance company.
Right.
You know, and obviously tornado, you can't blame the homeowner on that.
What are you going to do? Yeah.
And I mean, their house got pretty much destroyed.
Oh, wow.
You know, they had to move out. I don't know if they've ever moved back in, to be honest with you. So, you know, those are the kinds of people that this legislation's going to hurt. But the, that whole roofing industry kind of popped up. And the other thing this legislation does is it prohibits assignments. So you can no longer do an assignment of benefits, where basically what those roofers used to do is they come to your door, you'd sign a bunch of paperwork, and one of the things you were doing was doing assignment of benefits. Basically, you're assigning your right to sue the insurance company to a third party who can then stand in your shoes and sue on your behalf. So what they would do essentially is they'd make the claim saying that there was roof damage, that the roof needed to be replaced. If the insurance company didn't pay it to replace the roof, they would then sue them. Typically, they already had an attorney lined up who kind of worked with them on a regular basis. Because again, this was a whole industry.
Right. Yeah.
And then if they win in court, they get the free roof, or the roof paid for, so to speak, plus the attorney gets all their attorney's fees. So by eliminating that assignment of benefits, they're kind of eliminating that industry essentially. So that, I think that alone would have limited a lot of this litigation we're seeing. Taking out the attorney's fees clause, and hey, I get it. I'm an attorney. I'm certainly biased here a little bit,
right?
But just looking at from that consumer who, really has a legitimate claim, and I see this with insurance companies all the time. It needs to get paid, and the insurance company's goal is typically to pay as little as possible to drag out the claim, and you just have no leverage. It really limits your leverage because you don't want to pay out of pocket to go hire an attorney, and you certainly don't want to pay an attorney more than the claim's worth.
Right. You're in a no-win.
You're in a no-win. So it really gives the insurance company, who has, attorneys on staff that they're paying either way, most likely.
Right.
It gives them the upper hand to fight these claims, to fight against the consumer, to not pay them fair compensation. And you always say that, if the insurance companies actually paid fair compensation, that lawyers wouldn't be in business. There wouldn't be these lawyers fighting them. And I know a lot of people have a negative connotation when it comes to lawyers and insurance companies and all that kind of stuff. I get it, but if they were to pay fair compensation, a lot of these claims would go away. Now, this is a whole separate industry with this roofing thing that kind of popped up.
Sure, yeah.
And that's why they eliminated the assignment of benefits there. So we'll see it, ultimately, all we really care about, as we sit in our shoes today, at least me as the consumer, is, are my rates going to go down? Right?
Absolutely. 100%. That's everybody's concern. I can't afford my insurance anymore. What do I do?
Exactly. At this point, I don't have a claim against the insurance company for, a property claim or a roof claim. If I did, obviously, then I'd be concerned about the other things. But typically, we don't really care about those until they affect us personally.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So, the real question is, hey, are the rates going to go down? And I think really the only way rates are going to come down in the state of Florida is if insurance companies come back to the state. If we see more competition in the marketplace, that's typically healthier for rates. Rates typically come down. So I guess, only time will tell. People I've talked to in the industry say, we don't really expect to see any change for the next 2 to 3 years.
Man.
We'll see if that's true. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball. But man, the rates have really, it was really the last year have really skyrocketed.
Well, and that's the thing is, it is nice being able to have other insurance companies that are in the state. And when you're not happy with yours, or your rates skyrocket or something, or they force you to get a brand new roof after 10 years and your roof is just fine, you can no longer put out there, well, I'm going to shop around, because they know they got you. Go ahead, shop around. Nobody else is going to insure you.
Right. There's nothing you can do. I mean, on the old house, I've told this story before, we got that letter before the last insurance reform bill was passed. We got the letter from the insurance company saying, hey, your roof's approaching 10 years old. You have to replace it, or we're going to drop you. And so I had some roofers come out to look at it, to quote me, to replace it. And every single one of them said, this roof has 20 years left in it. Perfectly good roof. There's no reason to replace this. And then they passed the legislation which extended it, where they couldn't do that until it reached 15 years of age. So it bought us some time, and we didn't have to replace it in the end. But yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly good roof that didn't need to be replaced. But, because of the insurance company, I'm sure a lot of people, tore up their roof, wasted all that material, spent a bunch of money, put a new roof on, just because you have to maintain insurance on your property.
And legally, they can do that because say at 15 years now, you still have, and you can get proof from a contractor or whatever, a roofer, is saying, no, Mo and his family, they've got another 10 years on this roof. They can force you to do it or drop you legally.
Well, yeah, they can. Now, again, if more companies come back into the marketplace, then, because that's an individual policy based on the insurance company, right? So if there's more insurance companies in the marketplace, then there may be some people who are still willing to insure your roof if you get a certain kind of inspection, if you have their inspector come out, whatever the condition may be. But again, more competition in the marketplace, that's more likely to happen. when you only have one or two companies left in the state of Florida who are willing to insure you, that's typically not
Your hands are tied.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do there.
That's like me. My car insurance doubled because I have 2 teenage drivers.
Yeah.
And now I'm shopping around, and so it is nice having that leverage. Well, XYZ said they're going to do this for me, so I can twist a little bit of arms. But with the roofs, I mean, I was one of the people that I had a 21-year-old roof on my house.
Yeah.
And luckily, I guess, Citizens, they were the only ones that would take me. Yeah. And because I didn't have any claims or anything, my rates weren't that bad. But I actually just recently, January 1st, I got the email saying, congratulations, you are now covered by this insurance company. We took them over from Citizens, and it was all stemming back to them coming out and doing an inspection of my house now that I have a brand new roof.
Right.
Because I ended up having to get one of 25 years old or whatever it is now. Yeah, they weren't, nobody was going to insure me.
No, so I mean, it's become very expensive to live in the state of Florida because of homeowners insurance. Not only does it drive the rates up if you own a home, it drives the rates up for renters because the landlords are paying more in insurance. So it really affects the economy as a whole. So hopefully this does something to actually curb that. I think consumers are going to face some punishment here if they have claims. I think it's going to be very difficult to make claims against the insurance companies in the state of Florida for these property type claims. But ultimately, hopefully, those rates will start coming down, which will have an impact across the board. Not only for people who own homes, but people who are renting. When your homeowner's insurance triples, and you're the landlord, all you're doing is passing that expense across to your tenant.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So people are complaining, rent's through the roof. Well, that's one of the reasons why. I'm sure there's other reasons too. Don't get me wrong,
right.
I know my homeowner's insurance tripled after I spent the money to put a brand new roof on it. We put the brand new roof on. They said, oh yeah, we can get you a better rate after you put the new roof on it. I think the old roof was like 20 years old. This was a different house. And we put the brand new roof on it, went back to shop, and they go, oh no, you should keep the one you have. And then when it came up for renewal, literally tripled.
That's
actually a little over tripled.
Because I mean, that's that biggest expense, getting that roof put on. I mean, unless obviously
the
your
roof
friends
wasn't
with
cheap.
the tornado. No,
the roof
not
was
at all.
Cheap.
No, and roofs have gone way up in price.
Absolutely.
So wow, we only have a couple minutes left. But speaking of insurance and rates and stuff like that, do you have any tip for somebody that is shopping for car insurance?
Well,
for the best rate,
we could do an hour on that, but you want to go through it and first of all, make sure they have all your information updated. Actually, I called my insurance company last week and I noticed that they had my wife listed as fiance on the policy. I guess we had added her when we were not married. And I told him we need to update that. We've been married. And he goes, oh, congratulations. I go, yeah, that was 8 years ago. But my rate went down by like $600 because we were married versus not married.
That's crazy.
So,
congratulations on your wedding and your $600.
I'm more excited about the savings at this point. But yeah, make sure all your information is updated with them. Also, that could actually give them a reason to deny claims if you don't update your information with them, whether it's your address, your marital status, obviously your vehicles that are on the policy. Anything like that, you want to make sure is updated with them.
Okay, good info because I am currently shopping. Literally that
that
was kind of a Jay Edwards question there. Like, hey Mo, can you help me out with this? Because it is crazy. Everybody's got safe driving records. Nobody has caused any accidents. We've had people that have bumped into us or whatever, but we haven't been the cause of any accident. Nobody has any speeding tickets. We all have safe drivers on our license. But my insurance rates just continue to go up, and it is killing me.
With teen drivers like that, it's tough, and I think you just have to shop the companies against each other to try to find the best rate possible.
Hopefully they come down a little bit because, man, I have to get a 4th and 5th job to afford my kids' car insurance. All right, we're going to get to your questions. We got a stack of them here, and thank you so much for sending those emails. If you do have an email, you do have a question, you can send it to ask@dewittlaw.com. That's ask@dewittlaw.com. You can always leave a voicemail if that's easier, and then we'll play your voicemail back and get an answer and some advice from you from Mo. 407-53-MOSES. That's 407-53-MOSES. And we'll get to your questions coming up next. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review right here on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk.
All right, the crash happened. I was at a stop. The car was coming in, rear-ended me from behind. I was trying to get out of the way, but yeah, that didn't happen. Yeah. After the crash, I kind of sat down for a couple minutes, gathered my thoughts. After the ambulance and stuff, I got discharged, went home. I was really trying to think about what to do next because, that was my first accident. Of course, you hear all the time, call an attorney. So I wasn't really sure what route. I reached out to a friend of mine and she was just like, hey, I have someone you can reach out to. And she said, just call Mo.
Many of our clients are referred to us by friends and family, just like in Jamal's case. It was an honor to be able to represent him and ultimately fight to get him the compensation that he deserved.
My experience with Mo was really good. His team, his staff, very informative. I received all the information I needed, step by step. They made sure I was satisfied with everything, and everything has been really good. They're very detailed. They're very, they call or text whenever they make a move or whatever they're doing. They're mailing out a letter, anything. I'm always in the know. So that's really good on their part. So yeah, if a friend or family member, anyone would ever ask me if they need an attorney, I'll always say, just call Mo.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. My name is Jay Edwards here with attorney Mo DeWitt. Mo, if people want to get involved on the show, what's the best way for them to do so?
So you can always leave us a voicemail at 407-53-MOSES, which is 407-536-6737. Or you can email us at askask@dewittlaw.com. And, any legal question, we'll try to answer it here on the show. We don't always have the answers, but we try.
I do. I always have the answers. They're
right.
always wrong. Mo corrects me and no, that's bad advice. That's why we have him here. So
that's what I'm here for.
I've got good Brussels sprout recipes. That's my advice.
It's good to have a good Brussels sprout recipe. Those things are delicious.
That's about all I'm good for.
Yeah.
Speaking of leaving the voicemail, we've got one here. Let's get to this call.
Yes, I'm listening to you on the radio right now, and you were talking about terminating parental rights. My question is, what about a step-parent who raised the child from 2 to 15? And because he's not a biological parent, does he have any rights?
You want me to take this one? No, I'm just kidding.
I want to see what kind of wrong answer you have. In the state of Florida, step parents in this situation would not have any legal rights unless they adopt the child. So a lot of times what we'll see with a step parent in this kind of situation is there'll basically be a two-part process. One where the biological parent will terminate their parental rights, and then the step parent will adopt the children at the same time, or kind of simultaneously. That's the only way that they would have any sort of rights in the state of Florida, essentially. Now, remember, though, when you adopt a child as a step parent, it is just like you're adopting that child on your own. So if you get divorced, you're still responsible for that child. That child is still legally your responsibility, meaning, you legally have, custody or time sharing. You legally have to pay child support, all those kinds of things that go along with having a child. So it's not, something that should be taken lightly. It's a serious commitment. But if you don't do the adoption, then as the step parent, no, you do not have any legal rights in the state of Florida. I'm sure somebody's going to call up and say, the school lets me sign the kid out. I'm on there as the parent, so I have legal rights. I'm talking about legal rights as in regards to a court. Basically under the law in the state of Florida.
Rights.
Yeah,
legal.
Yeah. So, you just don't have any legal rights as a step parent unless you do the adoption.
And that was the biggest thing that I learned from you one time was, say, Bill and Sue are together and you know what? I love you so much. I'm going to adopt these babies and make them my own. And 2 weeks later, they end up getting a divorce. That man is now paying child support for the rest of those kids until they're adults or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I had a case where the wife had 3 children from a different marriage, and the new husband, the step parent, adopted those 3 kids, and then they had a kid together as well. The problem was when they got divorced, the 3 kids who weren't his wanted nothing to do with them, but he legally had to pay child support based on how many overnights they spent with him. So his child support was quite high because the kids didn't want anything to do with them. And there was 4 kids, and it was
not
expensive.
cheap.
Yeah, it was not cheap at all.
God,
you know,
It's
I hate to discourage things like that because obviously, a step parent adopting children like that is
it's a
loving
beautiful
act.
thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I don't mean to discourage it. As a lawyer in this field, sometimes we just kind of see the horror stories of these things that can happen, which is certainly not the norm. But as I've said before, being a lawyer kind of teaches you to think worst case scenario in every situation. So, this is probably, one of those worst case scenario situations where somebody was trying to do something loving and that they thought they would be in a relationship forever. And ultimately it didn't work out that way. And, ultimately he was responsible for that. But with any decision you make in life, you just want to know what you're getting yourself into and what you're obligating yourself for as part of that decision.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will get to more of your questions here coming up in just a few minutes. If you do have a question and you'd like to get some advice from Mo, you can send an email right now to ask@dewittlaw.com, ask@dewittlaw.com, or by calling and leaving a voicemail as well, 407-53-MOSES. And we'll be back here in just a minute taking your calls and giving you some advice. You're listening to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the DeWitt Law Review right here on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Every Sunday morning, you're learning how Florida's legal issues affect you with your host, Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Mo is answering your questions, discussing the latest legal issues affecting the citizens of Central Florida. And if you have a question, we just got some more in right now. Send those emails to ask@dewittlaw.com. That's ask@dewittlaw.com. You can leave a voicemail, 407-53-MOSES. Or Mo, if it's something that they don't necessarily want to be on the show and they need some legal advice, how can they do that? How can they reach you, your office, somebody from your team?
Well, you can always send an email anonymously to the show if you want to as well.
Okay.
ask@dewittlaw.com. But of course, you can always call the office, 1-800-DeWitt-LAW. It's 1-800-339-4885. We have people who are answering the phone 24 hours a day. You can always leave a message with them if one of us is not available. And like I've said before, if it's not something we handle, we'll try to point you in the right direction, see if we can get you over to an attorney who can assist you.
Right.
Obviously, we don't handle every kind of law in our office. But we'll certainly try to assist you and get you into the right hands if it's not something we can help you with.
And one of the things that you do specialize in, divorce, and you do have that book out. And if you didn't get it from Santa this year, you do have copies available.
I hope nobody got it from Santa. That's probably a bad Christmas.
Listen, you go tell Santa,
guide.
Get me through this divorce, Santa. And he pulls out, listen, this is the book that you need. Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Yeah, so it's called DeWitt's Guide to Divorce. It is on Amazon right now that you can purchase if you'd like. But you can also get a free copy if you go to DeWittDivorce.com. You can download it right there. And it's basically a guide for anybody who's thinking about going through a divorce or is currently going through a divorce. Kind of walks you through step by step the process of what to expect. Divorce is a scary time. And I think, a lot of times, and we get this in cases all the time, our client will be listening to their spouse rather than their attorney. And their spouse is telling them bad stuff because it helps the spouse, not them.
Of course.
So you just don't know who to turn to. You don't know who you can trust a lot of times. This is information that's out there that hopefully will help guide people through the process.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's scary, scary dealing with lawyers. It's scary being in court. And it's certainly scary going through a divorce and not knowing what your life is going to look like when you get out on the other side. So hopefully this book helps kind of guide people through that process, gives them a little bit of hope and lets them know what to expect. So that's not so scary, and that, ultimately you will get through the other side. Life goes on after divorce. You just have to kind of know what to expect and know what to prepare for.
There you go. All right. So on Amazon right now, if you want to purchase it, or you can go to DeWittDivorce.com and download it right there.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's get to some of our questions that we have. Laura wants to know, how do I go about removing a small claims case filed in Sumter County from public record?
So this is kind of a weird one. It's an interesting question. I think her concern was, that the case shows up when you do a Google search or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Once something's in the public record like that, there's no real way to remove it. Even, in this case, she goes on to say that, the lawsuit against her was eventually dismissed and, she just didn't want it showing up essentially. But once it's there, it's there. There's no real way to remove it. You could possibly have it sealed. The courts will allow certain cases to be sealed in certain scenarios. We need to know more details as to whether it qualified to be sealed or not. But otherwise, it will kind of live out there. Now, there's nothing, necessarily negative about that. People get involved in lawsuits, for all sorts of reasons.
Mhm.
You can be a tenant living in a property. The property gets foreclosed on. You're now named in the foreclosure lawsuit. You did nothing wrong.
Right.
So just because you're a party to a lawsuit doesn't mean that you did anything wrong on either side. But it is going to live out there in the public records. I don't know if there's anything that you can really do to get it removed from the public record. We had clerk of court from Seminole County email, and he was listening to the show one day, that maybe if we can get him on the show, that might be a good question to ask him.
Right.
But I think ultimately, once it's in the public record, it is going to live out there. You can do things like to seal it. This is a civil case. Now, if it was a criminal case, you can seal or expunge the criminal case. There's some things you can do there, again, if you qualify for that. But since this is a civil case, the only thing you could really do would be to seal it if it qualified to be sealed.
Gotcha.
And only certain cases qualify.
All right. Hopefully that helps, Laura. Next question. My spouse and I are separated. I'm seeking to buy a home here in Florida. Is my spouse required to sign for the home, or is there a form my spouse can waive his rights?
So this is something that comes up actually in divorces a lot because, one party will move out of the marital home and maybe they want to buy a new home.
Mm-hmm.
But if you buy a home in the state of Florida, we have very strong homestead protection laws. So when you're buying that home, the spouse has to sign on the mortgage to acknowledge it. They don't have to be listed on the mortgage as a borrower. They don't have to be obligated to pay the mortgage,
Okay.
but they have to acknowledge it. And the reason for that is in the state of Florida, they don't want one spouse going and taking a mortgage out on a homestead property without the other spouse's knowledge, because essentially, you go take out a couple $100,000 mortgage, you don't pay it, you disappear.
Surprise.
Now the innocent spouse who didn't know anything about it is being foreclosed and thrown on the streets.
It's there to protect you, right?
It's there to protect you. The
Okay.
state of Florida doesn't want people thrown on the streets who didn't have any knowledge of the mortgage. So the spouse will have to sign to acknowledge the mortgage. And a lot of times that becomes a point of contention in the divorce because they don't want to sign it, or they're using it as leverage
Mhm.
to try to get what they want in the divorce. So if you're going to buy a home and it's going to be your homestead, they're going to have to acknowledge the mortgage that way. So that's the first thing. Now, if you're doing that, I always recommend as well that they sign some sort of waiver of the interest in that property. So basically acknowledging that, hey, this is being purchased during a divorce after we've separated. This is separate non-marital property that's not to be considered as part of the divorce. Always good to get that in writing because, as we've seen before, things go south. Now people are arguing over everything. You just want to make sure that's off the table,
Right.
especially if you're, maybe you're using non-marital funds for it or something else. You want to make sure that's completely off the table and that there's no argument there. The only way around that essentially is if you purchase the property basically as an investment property. It's not going to be your homestead. Typically your mortgage rate's going to be a little bit higher.
Right.
It's going to be a different type of mortgage. Then you don't have to comply with the homestead protection because it's not your homestead. And so then you can purchase it that way. But it's going to cost you a little bit more money typically to do it that way.
How many times do you see where something does happen like this, and in the divorce, they're like, we decided to buy this beach condo or whatever the case may be, and babe, it's fine. Like, I'm ever going to come after you and try and get the beach condo or get your second house. Like that's yours.
Mhm.
That's your money. Things go south, like you say, and now all of a sudden it's like, you stepped out in this relationship. I want anything I can get my hands on.
It happens a lot. I mean, obviously, when things are going great, everyone's like, "Oh no, I would never come after you for this. I would never come after you for that." People become bitter. Maybe they hire
Sure.
lawyers who are telling them certain things that this is what they're legally entitled to, and they should go
Mhm.
after X, Y, or Z. And yeah, it can get ugly pretty quickly.
I'm sure.
in those scenarios. I'm sure there's listeners out there who have gone through that situation.
Shaking their head.
You may have
right now.
represented some of them. But yeah, I mean, unless it's in writing, it's not binding.
Right.
I've had people, who have told that story 1,000 times and said, they promised me they would never do this, this, or this, unless it's in writing, and that would be a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement.
Right.
It's not enforceable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know. All right. Next question here from Carlos. He says, I have a weird situation where my former CPA has filed my taxes, but I did not ask him to file my taxes. It was a big mess for me in my divorce because of my MSA, and the ex thought I did it on purpose. It became a big expense for me on his mistake. He even admitted to it in writing.
Okay.
Carlos says the damages I think are around $10,000 to $20,000, but are unknown depending on my future filings. This happened just over 2 years ago. Not sure if that prevents me from legally pursuing it. I'd like to file something in the courts and see if he is willing to settle it, or if his E&O insurance would not want it to go to a trial. So first of all, what's MSA?
Marital settlement agreement. So,
Okay.
So he must have gone through a divorce at some point in time. And, of course, I don't know anything about his divorce case, but typically in a marital settlement agreement, there's going to be a couple sections that deal with taxes and how you're going to handle the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is going to be who's claiming the children. Sometimes if there's 2 kids, maybe you each claim a child each year.
Right.
If there's 1 child, you rotate the exemption every other year. So that could be one issue. There could also be the issue of just, how the returns are split. If there's a return, how you split if you owe money. I'm not sure. Or maybe he filed that they were still married when they were supposed to be filed that they were separated that year.
Right.
Obviously, I don't know the details of what occurred there. Now, typically, though, you can file an amended return. So I don't know why it would cost him so much money. What was kind of done improperly there, or why it was done improperly.
Right. He just sent us the cliff notes.
Right. So it could have been a situation where, hey, the accountant automatically filed the taxes. Then the other side came after him in court because they were done improperly.
Right.
He got held in contempt or something like that. Had to pay his lawyer, had to pay a fine. I don't know. But, the first step here, if you did want to pursue an action, would be reach out to the accountant directly, send them either a demand letter or send them a letter requesting their insurance, their E&O insurance, like you said. Once you get that information, you want to set up a claim with the insurance company directly and basically see if they'll pay the claim before you file a lawsuit. Now, of course, you have to be cognizant of the statute of limitations. If, this occurred 2 years ago, we said. And so typically, the statute of limitations, if you don't comply with it, your case is barred forever. You cannot bring the claim. So, on a malpractice claim like this, it may be a 1 or 2 year statute of limitations.
Right.
It could be a fairly short statute of limitations.
So he could already be.
He could already be. So you want to make sure you get on that right away and make sure you're complying with the statute of limitations. If that is the case, then if you're within it, but it's about to run, you want to just go ahead and file a lawsuit right away to preserve it, get it in the court file.
Because then once it's filed, then you have all the time you need. Is
right,
that...
right. Once it's in the court system and you file within the statute period, as long as the case isn't dismissed, then you're good.
Okay.
You're good to pursue the claim. But yeah, if you miss the statute of limitations, you're basically barred. Now the statute of limitations does typically run from when you knew or should have known about the claim. So here, if this individual filed the taxes without telling him, and let's say the taxes were actually filed 2 years ago, but he didn't learn about it for 6 or 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
I guess he could the accountant might have power of attorney to electronically sign it. So maybe he didn't actually sign it. But yeah, once he learned about it, then the statute of limitations would start running from the date that he learned about it.
Gotcha.
So there can be some ambiguity in the dates there. Of course, you always want to use the earliest date out of an abundance of caution because, again, if you blow the statute of limitations, it's bad.
You're right.
You're done.
You're done.
Toast. Yeah.
Good to know. All right. Hopefully that helps. All right. We have just a couple minutes here, and I think you might be able to answer this quickly. This says, hey, Mo, a girl and I have been seeing each other. We work together. It's seemingly becoming toxic and spilling into work. I'm not sure how to end it.
Okay. Didn't realize this had turned into a relationship show, but
you said any topic, right?
I guess we did. Yeah, I don't know. Do we have a relationship show on the weekends here?
Yeah, it's called the J. Edwards. No.
The J. Edwards Hour. Just end it, I guess. I mean, it's going to be awkward if you guys work together, but
yeah, that would be bad.
Maybe you just get a new job and disappear into the night. I don't know.
Just up and leave, head for the mountains, head up to North Carolina or something. Yeah, because I guess you could always look into see if there's any kind of thing that prevents you from dating at work, and then that could be your excuse. Like, hey, I didn't even realize that one of us is going to have to quit, or we're going to have to end this.
Right. I mean, you can go that route, I guess.
All right. Well, maybe somebody's just trying to mess with us just to see.
Probably.
I heard Jay say that he can give advice on anything. Well, guess what? Deer in headlights on this
Yep.
one. All right. Well, we do have another question coming up from Bruce here in just a few minutes about a mediation conference that the court has scheduled. Plus, we'll get to our Mo Pro Tip of the Week coming up in just a few minutes. Mo, again, if they missed it at the beginning of the segment, your book is out, the name of it, and where you can get it.
DeWitt's Guide to Divorce. You can get on Amazon, but for listeners, we do have a free copy available at DeWittDivorce.com. You can go on there and download it for free.
And if somebody does have a question, maybe 2023 is a year, they're tired of this, they're ready to get out of this toxic relationship or end something, how can they call you or your office to get some advice that, off the air to maybe go ahead and start the process of starting a new chapter in their life?
Yeah, you can give us a call anytime, 1-800-DeWitt-LAW. That's 1-800-339-4885. Be happy to set you up with a consultation with one of the attorneys and guide you through whatever legal issues you may have. And like I said before, if it's not something we handle in our office, we'll certainly try to put you in touch with someone who can take good care of you.
Perfect. And if you do have a question for the show and you'd like for us to get your question on the air, send that email to ask@DeWittLaw.com, spelled DEWITT. ask@DeWittLaw.com. You can also call and leave that voicemail, 407-53-MOSES. We'll get to another one of your questions coming up. Plus, our Mo Pro Tip of the Week is on the way. You're listening to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk.
All right, welcome back to the Monsters Mornings River Radio 104.1, and we are broadcasting live from Orlando Harley-Davidson, right off the I-4. If you see us when you go by, give us a honk honk. We'd appreciate that. We're trying to get as many bikes as possible for for the Orlando City Foundation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would just like you to remember, if you're injured at all, ho, 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 just call Mo.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. Got your Mo Pro Tip of the Week coming up in just a minute, but just got another email sent to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's where you can get your questions asked and answered and get some advice from Mo DeWitt. Mo, this one is from Bruce, who wants to know, the court scheduled a mediation conference. I have not been served in this case. I don't think that I'm under the court's jurisdiction at this time and therefore not obligated to attend the mediation. What are your thoughts?
So let me back up and kind of explain, as part of any divorce, when someone starts a divorce, the other side has to be served with the divorce papers. So when you're served, a process server or the sheriff comes up to you, they hand you the documents, they say, these are divorce documents, you've been served. And that's what kind of starts the process. So from there, you then have, at least in the state of Florida, you have 20 days to respond to those documents, file an answer, file a response of pleading, and then that kind of starts the case. The case kind of starts from there. Here, it seems like the divorce case has been started, but he hasn't been served, but there's been some sort of order that he's received saying, hey, you're supposed to go to mediation. Now, most likely, that order was probably kind of automatically generated. And so it's generated as part of the case and says, hey, you're supposed to show up at mediation on such and such a date. And they don't realize that he hasn't actually been served in the case yet. So,
Gotcha.
You have two choices, obviously. You can voluntarily, number one, agree to service, number two, agree to show up at the mediation. Or you can say, I've not been served. I'm not under the court's jurisdiction, because when you're served, that gives the court personal jurisdiction over you. It basically means that you are now participating in this lawsuit. You've been personally served. You're on notice, and the case is going to continue. So if you choose not to participate, not to be voluntarily served, or not to accept service, then technically you don't have to attend mediation. Now, you're really just kicking the can down the road, of course, because at some point you'll probably be served, and you'll probably have to attend mediation, because mediation is required in most cases, in most divorce cases, in Central Florida at least. So, from a pure legal standpoint, until you're served, you don't have to participate. You're not on notice. The court has no jurisdiction over you. But once you are served, then yes, certainly you'd have to attend mediation when it is court ordered like that.
What if they can't find you? What if you just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth?
So, I mean, that does happen. And then usually we have to serve you by publication where basically we have to do a diligent search, see if we can find you anywhere, check, the postal records and all
Right.
sorts of public record databases, see if we can find you anywhere, in the world, essentially. If we can't, then we file an affidavit with the court saying that we've done a diligent search. We list everything that we've done to try to find you. And then we publish in the newspaper, in the part that nobody reads, of course, in the back there, for 4 consecutive weeks saying, hey, we're looking for this person because we have this lawsuit and we're going to continue it if nobody responds. Once we comply with all those conditions, then we can basically proceed in the divorce without the other person,
Okay.
have them defaulted. Now, it does limit some of the remedies that you can get in the lawsuit, but you can proceed to actually get divorced that way.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
always wondered that. What if people were like, haha, catch me if you can? And
Well,
I'm sure it happens.
I mean, we've had cases before where, hey, some young kids, they're 20 years old, they get married, they kind of just break up, they never bother getting divorced. 15 years passes and they want to get remarried and they have no idea where the other person is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've had that case a few times actually. So then you have to, and they most likely don't even live in the same area. They both
Right.
kind of moved away. So then you have to kind of go through that whole diligent search and try to find them. And if you can't, then you're serving them by publication. And that's really a case where they just want to get divorced. There's no assets or anything like that, obviously.
Gotcha. Well, I've put us up against the wall on time constraints, but I want to give you, we've got about a minute left for our
All right.
Mo Pro tip of the week.
I'll do a super quick one then. Beginning of the year, new year 2023, always a good time to check your estate plan. Go through your estate planning documents, your will, all that kind of stuff, and make sure it's up to date. Every year, your life changes, your assets change.
Sure.
Your family may have even changed. So you want to go back through and make sure that's all still up to date. A lot of times we get those documents prepared, we shove them in a drawer. We paid the attorney for them, they're signed off, they're done, and we never think about them again.
Right.
It will make your family's life a lot easier if something happens or when something happens, when you do pass away, to have those documents in order. So just make sure they're up to date. If you do need to get them modified, reach back out to your attorney to get those modified, and just make sure everything is accurate in them. Because like I said, things change year to year.
Perfect. There you go. Your Mo Pro tip of the week. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review right here on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. We'll be back next Sunday answering your questions.